On a freezing November night in a small Indiana town, a single father made a choice that most people wouldn't. He invited a stranger, a woman living out of her car, into his home. He thought he was just offering kindness. He had no idea that decision would bring a powerful man to his doorstep, threatening everything he'd built. Sometimes the simplest acts of compassion lead to the most complicated consequences. This is that story. If you enjoy stories about unexpected connections and quiet courage, I'd love for you to subscribe. It helps me share more of these with you. And let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from today? The afternoon light was fading over Millbrook, Indiana, casting long shadows across Main Street as Nathan Sawyer pushed open the door to Miller's Diner. The familiar bell chimed overhead, and the smell of coffee and frying bacon wrapped around him like an old friend. His daughter Lily skipped beside him, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, still clutching the report card that had earned them this celebration. "Table for two, Nathan?" Mrs. Kemp called from behind the counter, her smile tight and professional. She'd owned the diner for 30 years, knew everyone's business, and made sure everyone else did too. "Our usual booth if it's free," Nathan replied, guiding Lily toward the window seat they always claimed on Friday afternoons. This was their tradition. Good grades meant chocolate pancakes, no matter the time of day. Lily slid into the vinyl seat, her feet not quite touching the floor, and pressed her face against the cold glass. "Dad, look at that car." Nathan glanced up from the laminated menu he didn't need to read. Across the street, parked in the loading zone behind the hardware store, sat a battered Honda sedan. The windows were fogged from the inside, and even from this distance, he could see blankets piled in the back seat. Someone was living in that car. "That lady's been there 3 days now," Mrs. Kemp announced, appearing at their table with 2 glasses of water. She didn't bother lowering her voice. "Making folks uncomfortable, if you ask me. Can't be good for business having vagrants hanging around where families eat." Through the window, Nathan could make out a figure in the driver's seat. A woman, thin and hunched, wrapped in a coat too light for the weather. She was reading something, a book with a water-damaged cover, her breath visible in small clouds. "Why is she living in her car?" Lily asked, her voice soft with concern that made Nathan's chest tighten. His daughter had inherited her mother's tender heart, even if Melissa herself had left that tenderness behind when she walked out 2 years ago. "Sometimes people fall on hard times, sweetheart," Nathan said carefully, aware of Mrs. Kemp still hovering, of the other diners whose conversations had quieted to listen. "Well, I've already called Sheriff Morton," Mrs. Kemp continued, pulling out her order pad. "As a father, Nathan, you understand we need to keep undesirables away from our children. Can't have just anyone loitering where families gather." Nathan felt heat creep up his neck. The way she said, "as a father," carried weight, carried judgment. Ever since Melissa left, taking nothing but her clothes and her disappointment, Nathan had felt the town's eyes on him differently. Single fathers were suspect in Millbrook. Some parents had quietly stopped inviting Lily to playdates. Others whispered about whether a man could really raise a daughter properly on his own. He'd heard the comments at the hardware store, at the grocery store, always just loud enough to reach his ears. Poor thing, growing up without a mother. He means well, but a girl needs a woman's touch. Melissa must have had her reasons for leaving. Now, sitting in the diner with those same judgmental eyes on him, Nathan felt the familiar weight of being found wanting. He nodded to Mrs. Kemp, not trusting his voice, and ordered Lily's chocolate pancakes. But Lily wasn't listening. She was staring at the woman in the car, her small face serious and thoughtful. "Dad, she looks cold and hungry. Lily, you always say kindness matters more than anything. You said that when Tommy pushed me at school and I wanted to push back. You said being kind is what makes us strong." Nathan glanced at the woman again. There was something about her that didn't fit the image of someone who'd been homeless long. Her posture, even slumped in defeat, carried a kind of refinement. The way she held the book, the careful way she turned the pages, these were the gestures of someone educated, someone who'd known better days. "That's true, sweetheart, but—" Lily suddenly slid out of the booth, her report card forgotten on the table. Before Nathan could stop her, she grabbed the plate of chocolate pancakes Mrs. Kemp had just delivered and walked straight toward the door. "Lily!" Nathan scrambled after her, aware of the sudden silence in the diner, of Mrs. Kemp's scandalized gasp, of the booth full of mothers near the window leaning together to whisper. He caught up with his daughter just as she stepped into the parking lot, the November wind cutting through both their jackets. The woman inside the Honda startled awake when Lily knocked gently on the window, eyes wide with confusion and fear. She stared at the child through the glass, then her gaze shifted to Nathan, suspicious and wary. Slowly, she rolled down the window just a crack. Her voice was hoarse when she spoke. "Can I help you?" Lily held up the plate, her smile bright. "My dad says kindness matters more than anything. You look hungry." The woman's face crumbled, her eyes filling with tears. It was clear no one had shown her compassion in a long time. "That's very sweet, but I can't accept." Nathan arrived, embarrassed but moved by his daughter's heart. He saw the woman up close now, noticed the refined bone structure beneath the exhaustion, the careful way she spoke despite her circumstances. Her hands didn't match someone who'd been homeless long, no calluses, nails still neatly trimmed. Against every practical instinct, fully aware that Mrs. Kemp and half the town were watching through the diner windows, Nathan heard himself say, "It's going to drop below freezing tonight. Our house has a guest room, just for tonight." The woman's eyes widened, fresh tears spilling over. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." "Because my daughter's right. Kindness matters." For a long moment, the woman just stared at him, as if trying to determine whether this was real or some kind of trap. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Just for tonight," she whispered. "Thank you." As she gathered her few belongings from the car, Nathan noticed a black Mercedes with tinted windows driving slowly past, circling the block. Someone was watching. The house on Maple Street was modest but clean, evidence of a man doing his best. Elena, she'd given them just her first name, stood awkwardly in the small living room, clearly overwhelmed. Lily chattered excitedly, showing her drawings on the refrigerator while Nathan heated leftover chicken casserole. Over dinner, Elena carefully deflected personal questions, revealing only that she was between situations and looking for work. But Lily's innocent questions chipped away at her walls. "Do you have kids? A family?" Elena's hands trembled around her fork. "I had a family once. A father. We don't speak anymore." Nathan noticed her discomfort, gently changed the subject. As Elena helped wash dishes, insisting on contributing somehow, she paused at a photo on the shelf. Nathan and Lily at the county fair, both grinning. "You're a good father," Elena said quietly. "She's lucky." There was something haunted in her voice, something that spoke of fathers who weren't good, of luck that had run out. Later that night, After Lily was asleep and Nathan showed Elena to the guest room, his phone buzzed. Sheriff Morton's name lit up the screen. Nathan stepped into the hallway to answer. "Nathan, need to talk to you about your house guest." The sheriff's voice was tight with concern. "Judge Hartwick's office has been making calls. Be careful who you're sheltering." The morning came too quickly. Nathan had barely slept, his mind replaying Sheriff Morton's cryptic warning about Judge Hartwick making calls. He'd left Elena sleeping in the guest room and Lily safely at school, but the unease followed him like a shadow as he unlocked Sawyer's auto repair at 7:30. Sheriff Morton's patrol car was already waiting in the lot. "Morning, Nathan." The sheriff climbed out slowly, his expression uncomfortable. Tom Morton was a decent man, had been 2 years ahead of Nathan in high school, but right now he looked like someone delivering bad news he didn't want to carry. "Need to talk to you about your house guest." Morton shifted his weight, not quite meeting Nathan's eyes. "Judge Richard Hartwick called my office last night, then again this morning at 6. Nathan's stomach dropped. What did he want? "He's looking for his daughter, Elena Hartwick. She's been missing 2 weeks now. Walked away from some kind of treatment facility outside Indianapolis." Morton pulled out a small notebook. "Description matches the woman you brought home yesterday." The air felt suddenly thin. "Treatment facility?" "That's what the judge says. Claims she's not well, Nathan. Mentally unstable, had some kind of breakdown." Morton looked up, genuine concern in his eyes. He's worried she might be a danger, to herself or others, especially around children. The words hit like a punch. Nathan thought of Elena at dinner last night, the gentle way she'd listened to Lily's stories. Nothing about her had seemed dangerous. "She didn't seem unstable to me." Maybe not. But Judge Hartwick is a powerful man, district judge, connections all the way to the State House, and he's her father. Morton closed the notebook. "I'm not telling you what to do, just passing along information. But if she is sick, if something happened to Lily because you didn't know." He let the implication hang in the cold morning air. Nathan watched the sheriff drive away, then stood alone in his empty parking lot. He needed parts for the Henderson truck, which meant a stop at Morrison's Hardware. The store was busy for a Wednesday morning. Nathan grabbed what he needed and headed for the checkout. That's when he heard them. 2 women stood near the paint display, voices pitched just loud enough to carry. Nathan recognized them both. Sharon Winters and Diane Kowalski, mothers of girls in Lily's class. Women who'd smiled at him at school functions while keeping their daughters at a careful distance. "Can you imagine?" Sharon was saying, shaking her head. "Bringing some unstable stranger into his home, right there with his little girl sleeping down the hall. What was he thinking?" He wasn't thinking. Diane selected a paint sample. That's exactly the problem. Man living alone that long, raising a daughter by himself. It clouds the judgment. This is exactly why Melissa left him, you know. Poor judgment. No common sense. Nathan stood frozen in the aisle, the metal parts suddenly heavy in his hands. Heat crept up his neck, burning in his ears. "I heard from Betty Kemp that the woman was practically homeless," Sharon continued. "Living in her car. Could have any kind of disease, any kind of history. And he just invites her in like it's nothing." Well, men don't think about these things the way mothers do. They don't have that protective instinct. Diane's voice dropped to a stage whisper. "I'm just saying, if something happens to that little girl, people will ask why nobody stepped in." They turned then and saw Nathan standing there. Their faces registered shock, then something worse, pity mixed with vindication. They'd meant for him to hear. "Nathan," Sharon said, voice dripping false sweetness. "We didn't see you there." He couldn't speak, couldn't defend himself, couldn't make them understand that he'd been trying to teach his daughter compassion. The words stuck in his throat. He paid for his parts in silence and left. By the time Nathan reached home, it was just past noon. His hands shook slightly as he unlocked the door, the women's words still echoing. Poor judgment. Exactly why Melissa left. Men don't think like mothers do. He found Elena and Lily in the backyard. They were standing near the old oak tree, heads tilted back, Elena pointing up into the bare branches. Lily's laughter carried on the wind, bright and uncomplicated. As Nathan watched through the kitchen window, Elena crouched down to Lily's level. "That's a blue jay," Elena was saying. "See the crest on its head? They're smart birds. They can mimic hawk calls to scare other birds away." "Really?" Lily's eyes were wide with wonder. "Can you teach me the other birds too?" It was such a normal scene. A woman who loved nature sharing that love with a curious child. Nothing dangerous, nothing unstable, just kindness. Then Nathan saw it. Across the street, parked beneath the elm tree, sat a black Mercedes with tinted windows. The same car that had circled the diner yesterday. It sat there, engine off, watching his house, watching his daughter. Nathan's blood ran cold. He stepped outside, and both Elena and Lily turned toward him. Elena's smile faded when she saw his expression. "Lily, honey, go wash up for lunch," Nathan said, keeping his voice steady. "But Dad, now please." Something in his tone made Lily obey without argument. She ran inside, leaving Nathan and Elena alone in the yard. The Mercedes didn't move. "You need to tell me the truth," Nathan said quietly. "All of it. Right now." Elena's face went pale, but she didn't look away. She nodded slowly. "You talked to the sheriff. He told me about your father, about the treatment facility, about you being unstable." Nathan forced himself to ask the question. "Is any of it true?" Elena was silent for a long moment, her gaze drifting to the Mercedes across the street. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but laced with old pain. "My father is Judge Richard Hartwick, one of the most powerful men in the state. That part is true." She turned back to Nathan, and there was steel beneath the exhaustion in her eyes. "But I'm not unstable. I'm not dangerous. And I didn't run away from treatment. I was legally discharged." She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out folded papers, worn soft from handling. Discharge documents from Riverside Wellness Center dated 2 weeks ago. Patient released in stable condition. No restrictions on independent living. "Then why is your father looking for you?" "Because I won't do what he wants anymore." Elena's hands trembled slightly. 3 years ago, I tried to set boundaries, tried to live my own life, and he had me committed. Said I was having a breakdown. I wasn't. I was just finally standing up to him. Nathan stared at her. Why would a judge do that to his own daughter? Control. The word came out bitter. When I refused, when I broke off my engagement to the man he'd chosen for me, he decided I was mentally ill. And because he's a judge, because he's respected, everyone believed him. She looked toward the Mercedes again. He's kept me silent for 3 years. Every time I try to leave, he finds me, claims I'm having an episode, and because he controls all my money, I have nowhere to go. No friends who will risk his anger. Nathan wanted to believe her, but what if he was wrong? "I don't expect you to believe me," Elena said. "Powerful men are always believed over desperate women. I'll pack my things and leave tonight. I never meant to bring trouble to your door." Before Nathan could respond, there was a sharp knock at the front door. 3 heavy, authoritative knocks that seemed to shake the house. Through the side gate, Nathan could see 2 police cars now parked in front of his home, and standing on his porch, flanked by officers, was a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. Judge Richard Hartwick had come to collect his daughter. Nathan couldn't sleep. It had been 2 days since Elena left with her father. 2 days since he'd watched her climb into that Mercedes with terror in her eyes and mouth those 2 words. "Help me." 2 days of replaying Judge Hartwick's cold smile, his thinly veiled threats about business licenses and custody reviews. 2 days of feeling like a coward. The judge's visit had been a masterclass in intimidation. He'd stood on Nathan's porch with the authority of the law itself, speaking in measured tones about his poor, confused daughter who needed professional help. The officers had shifted uncomfortably, but they'd made it clear. The judge had legal guardianship papers. If he insisted, they would take Elena. "Mr. Sawyer," the judge had said, his voice smooth as silk, "I appreciate you sheltering my daughter, but she's not well. She needs professional care, not the charity of strangers." Elena had saved Nathan from having to choose. She'd stepped forward and agreed to go. But as she walked toward the Mercedes, she'd looked back at Nathan and mouthed those words. Now, at 3 a.m, Nathan sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open, searching for answers. He started with the basics. Judge Richard Hartwick had been on the bench for 15 years, presiding over high-profile cases throughout central Indiana. His photograph showed a distinguished man with sharp eyes, the kind of face that inspired confidence. But Nathan kept digging. He found old society pages from the Indianapolis Star, archived photos from charity galas. Judge Hartwick always attended with his daughter on his arm, both of them smiling for the cameras. And there, in an announcement from 4 years ago, the engagement of Elena Hartwick to State Senator Marcus Brennan's son, Thomas. A wedding that would have united 2 of Indiana's most powerful political families. Nathan searched for wedding announcements, but found none. Instead, he found a brief mention in a gossip column from 3 years ago. Wedding of the season canceled. Sources say the bride-to-be had a change of heart. And then, 6 months later, Elena Hartwick taking time away from public life for health reasons. The first treatment stay, Nathan realized, right after she broke the engagement. The next morning, Nathan left Lily with his neighbor and drove to Indianapolis. Riverside Wellness Center sat on a manicured campus outside the city, the kind of place that called itself a wellness center instead of a psychiatric hospital, because wealthy families paid for the discretion. A nurse was leaving her shift as Nathan arrived. She was young, tired, and when Nathan explained he was looking for information about a former patient, she hesitated. "I can't talk about patients," she said, but something in her expression shifted when he mentioned Elena's name. But hypothetically, sometimes wealthy families use places like this to control difficult relatives." "Hypothetically," Nathan pressed, "what would make an admission questionable?" The nurse glanced around the parking lot, then lowered her voice. "Hypothetically, if a patient's father used his connections to have his adult daughter admitted against her will, claiming mental instability when she was really just refusing to marry the man he'd chosen, that would be questionable." And if that same patient was kept here through 3 separate stays over 3 years, always after trying to establish independence, that would be wrong. She walked away before Nathan could ask more, but it was enough. Elena had been telling the truth. Back in Millbrook, Nathan found himself at the public library. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, had known him since he was a boy. When he asked to see archives of legal filings and court records, she didn't ask questions, just showed him to the microfiche machine. 3 hours later, Nathan's eyes ached. He'd found patterns in Judge Hartwick's rulings, cases where developers received favorable decisions, where wealthy defendants got surprisingly light sentences. Nothing definitive, but enough to suggest that the judge's reputation for integrity might be a carefully constructed facade. And then he found it. Buried in property records from 6 years ago. A land transfer from Hartwick to a development company, followed by favorable zoning decisions. The sale price seemed suspiciously low. Nathan photographed the records with his phone, his hands shaking. This was bigger than he'd thought. If Elena knew about this, if she'd threatened to expose it, that would explain why her father wanted her silenced. He needed help. Nathan drove 2 towns over to a modest house with a garden full of autumn mums. Margaret Riley answered the door, Elena's cousin, and when Nathan explained who he was, her face went pale. "You've seen her? Is she all right?" "Her father took her 2 days ago. She told me to help her." Margaret invited him inside, and over coffee she confirmed everything. Richard destroyed Elena's life because she wouldn't be his political pawn. The engagement to Thomas Brennan was supposed to secure Richard's appointment to the state Supreme Court. When Elena refused, he had her committed. Can we get her out? Legally? We can establish her legal independence, get her access to her trust fund from her mother's estate. Richard's been illegally controlling it for years, but we need Elena's cooperation, and we need documentation. Nathan felt hope kindle in his chest. "I can get the documentation." Margaret studied him carefully. "Why are you doing this? You barely know her." "Because it's right, and because someone needs to stand up to men like him." They spent the next hour planning. Margaret knew lawyers who might be willing to take on a judge if the case was solid enough. Nathan would gather evidence, find a way to contact Elena, build a case strong enough that even Judge Hartwick couldn't dismiss it. He drove home energized for the first time in days. They could do this. They could help Elena reclaim her life. The house was dark when he pulled into his driveway. Too dark. Nathan's neighbor should have had Lily home by now. The lights on, dinner started. His heart began to race as he unlocked the door. "Lily?" Silence. Then a small sound from the kitchen. Nathan found his daughter sitting at the table in the dim light, her face streaked with tears. In front of her lay an official-looking envelope already opened. "Lily, sweetheart, what's wrong?" She looked up at him with eyes too old for her 9 years. "A lady came today. She said she was from Child Protective Services. She gave this to Mrs. Patterson." Nathan picked up the letter with hands that had gone numb. The words swam before his eyes. Anonymous complaint. Concerns regarding parental judgment. Preliminary hearing. Evaluation of fitness as a guardian. "She told Mrs. Patterson that they might have to take me away from you," Lily whispered. "Dad, I don't want to leave. Please don't let them take me away." Nathan pulled his daughter into his arms, feeling her small body shake with sobs. Over her head, he saw the letter's date. The preliminary hearing was in 3 days. The hospital waiting room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Nathan sat with his head in his hands, still wearing the grease-stained work shirt he'd had on when the school called. Lily had collapsed during recess, hyperventilating, unable to catch her breath. Panic attack, the doctor said. Stress-induced, brought on by fear. Fear that she was going to lose her father. When they finally let him see her, Lily was sitting up in the hospital bed, looking small and pale against the white sheets. Her eyes were red from crying, and when she saw Nathan, she burst into fresh tears. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I tried to be brave like you said, but the kids at school were talking. They said CPS takes children away from bad parents, and I got scared." Nathan held her, his own eyes burning. "You have nothing to be sorry for, sweetheart. Nothing. This is my fault." "No." Lily pulled back, her voice fierce despite the tears. "It's not your fault you helped that lady. You did the right thing. You always do the right thing." In that moment, looking at his daughter's faith in him, Nathan felt something shift inside his chest. He'd been so focused on protecting what he had, on not making waves, on proving to the town that he was a good father. But what kind of lesson was he teaching Lily if he showed her that kindness got punished and power always won? The next morning, Nathan made a decision. He called Margaret, and together they put the plan in motion. Elena would file for legal independence and control of her trust fund. They would submit the evidence Nathan had gathered about Judge Hartwick's questionable rulings to the state attorney general's office, and they would do it publicly, all at once, so the judge couldn't silence them quietly. It was risky. Hartwick would retaliate. But living in fear, letting him control their lives through threats and intimidation, that wasn't living at all. Margaret had managed to get a message to Elena through a sympathetic staff member at the facility where Hartwick had placed her. Elena's response came back within hours. She was ready to fight. They filed the paperwork on a Monday morning. By noon, the story had leaked. A local reporter named James Chen, who'd been quietly investigating Judge Hartwick for years, picked it up immediately. By evening, it was regional news. Judge's daughter alleges corruption, abuse of mental health system. The response was swift. Some people rallied to Hartwick's defense, calling Elena unstable, calling Nathan a troublemaker. But others came forward, people who'd wondered about the judge's decisions, who'd felt the weight of his influence, who'd been too afraid to speak up alone. That evening, as Nathan was putting Lily to bed, there was a knock at the door. Not the aggressive pounding from before, but something quieter, almost hesitant. Judge Richard Hartwick stood on the porch alone. No police, no lawyers, no Mercedes with tinted windows. Just a man in an expensive suit who suddenly looked older than his years. "Mr. Sawyer, I think we need to talk. Perhaps we can reach an arrangement that benefits everyone." Nathan let him in, but this time he didn't feel afraid. He called Margaret, put her on speakerphone as a witness, and faced the judge in his own living room. Hartwick tried everything. He offered to drop the CPS case, to give Elena a generous monthly allowance, to leave Nathan alone entirely. All he asked was that they withdraw the allegations, let the matter drop quietly. "You're a father, Mr. Sawyer," the judge said, his voice almost pleading. "You understand protecting your child at all costs. Elena is my child. I was only protecting her." Nathan thought about that, about what it meant to protect someone. "Protecting her?" he said quietly. "You imprisoned her. You silenced her. You tried to break her spirit so she'd do what you wanted. That's not protection, Judge Hartwick. That's ownership." The door opened then, and Elena walked in. Margaret had arranged for her release that afternoon, with lawyers and paperwork that even Hartwick couldn't override. She looked different than the frightened woman from the car, different even from the terrified daughter who'd been dragged away. She stood straight, her voice steady. "You taught me that power matters more than truth, Father. That reputation matters more than integrity. But Nathan taught me something different." She looked at Nathan, gratitude and strength in her eyes. "He taught me that ordinary courage matters. That kindness isn't weakness. That standing up is possible, even when you're afraid." Judge Hartwick had built his power on fear, on keeping people isolated and silent. But standing together, speaking truth, Nathan and Elena became something he couldn't control. "You have no idea what you've started," the judge said, his voice hollow. "The investigation, the publicity, it will destroy our family name." "No, Father," Elena said softly. "You already did that. I'm just ending the lie." Judge Hartwick left without another word. As his car pulled away, Nathan's phone buzzed. An email from the state attorney general's office. They were opening a formal investigation. But there was more. In the 2 days since the story broke, dozens of people had come forward with similar stories. Other families Hartwick had manipulated. Other cases where justice had been compromised. The wall of silence was finally breaking. 3 months later, everything had changed. Judge Richard Hartwick had resigned from the bench, facing multiple ethics charges. His career was over, his reputation destroyed. Elena had full control of her life for the first time in years. She'd enrolled in graduate school, studying social work, determined to help others trapped in situations like hers. She'd rented a small apartment in Millbrook, close enough to visit but far enough to build her independence. The CPS case against Nathan had been dropped with formal apologies. The community potluck at Riverside Park was a Millbrook tradition every October. Nathan stood near the food tables, watching Lily run through the fallen leaves with her friends. Elena was there too, helping serve potato salad, chatting easily with neighbors who 3 months ago had called her unstable. Sharon Winters approached Nathan, her expression genuinely contrite. "I owe you an apology. What you did, standing up for her when everyone told you not to, that took real courage. I'm sorry I doubted you." Nathan accepted gracefully. Across the park, he saw Elena push Lily on the swings, both of them laughing. The relationship between Nathan and Elena remained undefined. There was something there, warmth and connection, moments when their eyes met, and understanding passed between them. But it was patient, unhurried. They'd both learned that real love wasn't dramatic declarations. It was showing up. It was standing together when it mattered. Lily ran toward them, grabbing both their hands, pulling them toward the dessert table. For a moment, they looked like a family, not bound by law or blood, but by choice, by courage, by having faced down fear together. Elena caught Nathan's eye over Lily's head. No words needed, just a look of gratitude, of hope, of understanding that sometimes the bravest thing is simply opening your door to someone in need. The sun was setting over the park, casting golden light through the trees. A small town, ordinary people, but also a place where courage had found its voice, where kindness had triumphed over power. And in that ordinary moment, 3 people walking toward a dessert table as the sun set, there was the quiet promise of tomorrow, the knowledge that they'd faced the worst and chosen kindness anyway. That was enough. It was everything.